Okay, well, sort of a part two. I wanted to continue the story on the smoke and the why and what started some of this stuff. Okay, so we went from the old smoke to all the variations to what we think is now the next generation, the final evolution of smoke. It'll be refined, but it'll look a lot like this. And then how we stick it to different engines. But I also wanted to show you a little bit of an example of the old smoke in its glory. And here we see a little Atlantic with my smoke system on it. And I'm using Lionel's TMCC because I have it. And this is engine 69 because it's 1969. Well, it was. If I turn the antenna up, maybe it'll work better. There we go. And I crank it up. And what I want you to notice is that limit switch right there, that black switch, and how that little, there's a cam there that's causing it to go out and in. That is the trigger. That is the trigger for the chuff sound. Boom. Boom. Okay? It does both the sound and the smoke firing. Now you're going to see smoke coming. The lid's not bolted on, so it's just going to come out. But you can see smoke's coming out. The fan is turning on. The heater is fired up. And the sound and the puffs are going to be triggered by the smoke chuff trigger. That's kind of where I went with this. That was about as far as I could go with what I had. And then I had other things I wanted to try to do. But this required an existing smoke gear, for one thing. And I had to create these mounts, which I did in 3D. I had to find the switch, I had to find the board, I had to wire it all up. But it would work, and it was pretty good. But look how close it is on the Atlantic, and I didn't have a lot of room, and I'm running out of housings, and I needed a new housing. So then I went to all of these gyrations to end up here. I know it looks long, but I can bring the nose back if I have to. I can size it the way I want to. One of my key objectives was the old Royal Blue. And if anybody knows, the Royal Blues didn't really have, this was all closed off. I mean, didn't have smoke. And the hard part for me was the chassis didn't lend itself to smoke. In the case of the chassis that had the smoke, two things. One, it had a gear, but it also had mounting capabilities. It had holes and divots and things where you could build a little adapter plate, and then you could bolt your smoke down, and you're cooking. Here, there was no gear, nothing to deal with. How am I going to figure this out? So I came up with this plate kind of a thing to adapt the smoke to it, and it slides on, you put a bolt down, and it's hooked, it's in position, and now I'm worrying about how do I get my signal out. And here's one concept where I put a gear back here. But I also wanted to share with you a couple of other concepts for driving that thing. Like I said, here we have the cam and the limit switch. Another approach that I've come across was actually creating a tachometer that counts the rotations, and you program it to know how many rotations are 90 degrees, and then it fires. So you can use a tach. This is a little more sophisticated and more expensive. This is not as expensive, but if it doesn't have the gear, if you're really had like this, the only thing you could do is a magnetic reed switch on the back and trigger off of a rotation of a tender wheel. That'd be the best approach. Other parts that I had to make along the way is the motor plate. This is how we mount the motor and the fan, and then we bolt them into the back. They just fit in. I made some lids, 3D printed lids, but as you can imagine, they melt. I've come up with several designs for adapter plates. This is one. The beauty of these is, like we show you here, here's an Atlantic and a Pacific. If I wanted to, this thing will mount over here and work on a Pacific. This plate would be a little variation of that plate, but it would also work on a non-smoke Atlantic. which didn't have a gear, but it could hold smoke. I'll make some variations to this so it fits properly, but that's the idea. We're still kind of wondering, why am I going through all this? What's going on? It seems like a lot of work. It certainly is a lot of design time and printing time, a lot of effort. But there are other engines that I'm looking at and considering. One that I've had, actually I have two of these for quite some time now. I haven't done anything with it, but now I can. I can put my adapter here, since we used a modified housing, mount my smoke, and I have digital smoke for this mountain version of the K5. One of the challenges I had with this particular model is this flange is bent so that my adapter plates don't work. Even the factory motor won't mount to it now. It's bent. I don't know what happened. So that got me started into looking at designing and building chassis, which I'm also working on. But there were other engines that I still had in mind that I wanted to adapt. This is an American Flyer. It's fairly old, O gauge, but I saw opportunities to modify engines, taking different chassis and looking at how we could make those American Flyer frames fit, and then get new designs of engines out onto the rails. And even one of my favorites of all time, Norfolk and Western Streamline J class. So I'll be looking at the smoke aspects, but I'm also going to be looking at how to make the smoke trigger, how to adapt different chassis and frames, how to adapt to different engines that are unique and custom, and potentially how to adapt chassis and smoke and triggers to engines that aren't even part of the family, but we sure would like them on our railroad to go running around. And it would all be compatible with whatever control system, whether it's the Lionel or the Mike's Train House or DCC or Digitrax, wouldn't matter. If you're consistent with your controls, you could figure this stuff out and it'd be pretty straightforward. So my next goal is to end this kit in the simplest form, which will be the heat resistant smokehouse, probably the reed switch off the tender, and a fan smoke, and all of the instructions on how to adopt it, even without the DC can. You could run it with the old AC motor if you wanted to, and it would probably do just fine, as long as you get the you have a smoke control board of some kind and they're available. I'm getting some really good ones from a Train Buddy. I'll be sourcing parts from 4 or 5 different sources, and my goal is to put this into a kit form with a list, with a book of instructions, and where you can get the parts. You could order all the parts from the sources, not me. This is not a business. This is just an adventure to make something better for us all, if that makes sense. At any rate, designing, doing prototype testing, but then when it gets to production, I send these designs out for professionals printing and putting together. So that's the story. That's why I'm going through all these gyrations, and what my goal is to get us to a point where the hobby can be much more fun, more robust, broadening our reach, and introducing some new things along the way, such as fireboxes that hide the motor and actually show a little fire in that hole, little LED flicker fire. I have some of these designed for different engines as well. I'm working on that. So a few things going on I'm retired, so I can do whatever I want. And